You are all aware that we are wading through very, very difficult times. And when the world is suffering from severe impact of COVID-19, and on top of it, the Chinese deception, duplicity, and aggression, India more so. This has become far more accentuated as already the two biggest economic powers have been at loggerheads through mutually destructive trade wars, apart from increasing protectionism and unilateralism at the expense of multilateral institutions. You may have heard about the United Nations, WTO, and WHO, and even the climate change agreement that have been undermined by President Trump's administration. The whole world has been going through a severe and unseen economic downturn and global recession and an unprecedented health crisis. COVID has proved to be the biggest disruption and a leveler of sorts. In this context, it was Prime Minister Modi who brought up the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, which essentially is self-reliance or self-reliance plus. Because today, while he was giving the economic package and the stimulus package to revive the economy from the coronavirus pandemic, one realized that how much dependent India was on many inputs that were coming out of China. For example, more than 70-80% of the APIs for pharmaceuticals come from China. And we are supposed to be the pharmacy of the world or the vaccine capital of the world. Now, in order to do that, to be able to survive through that, it is important that certain key parameters, certain key products must be available to us where we must have a full edge. As far as the subject, if you look at it merely in terms of self-reliance, it is not new to us. As you know that during the British time, when they decided to partition the Bengal, a Swadeshi movement was launched by Bal Gangadhar Tilak and others. But since post-independence, India has judiciously followed the policy of self-reliance, aiming at import substitution by various initiatives. Then there was the Green Revolution, because despite the fact that most of the Indian population was dependent on agriculture, the productivity wasn't high enough, nor was agricultural activities or the outputs. So consequently, we had famines, we had hunger, people died, and we were dependent on Americans and everybody else for giving some kind of food assistance to us. Now, during that period, Mr. M.S. Swaminathan, he started during the 50s and 60s something called, he launched the Green Revolution, which was including the new technologies, new agronomic practices, high yield variety seeds, insecticides, pesticides. Consequently, what happened? We became not only self-sufficient in terms of food grains, but today we have become the net exporter of the food grains to many countries in the world. Another thing India did, and the Indian leadership in the early years did, was they created these temples of wisdom like yours, as well as IIT and various agricultural universities. Then it was decided that we should try and be independent as far as milk was concerned. And so these have been very successful experiments that have created dependence, self-dependence in India, and we've become a little bit less dependent on the rest of the world. But we are not living in a cocoon or an island. We are living in a more globalized world. And therefore, we need to be dependent to the extent that we have certain strengths that are going to benefit us over time. But this new, in fact, I must add that at the Yale Review, the famous economist, Mr. Keynes, had come up with a paper which was called National Self-Sufficiency. And it is very much like the self-reliance. So in this one, in this integrated global world, interdependent global world, how are we going to move it? But it does not mean that we are going to isolate or cut ourselves from the rest of the world. We have to be dependent because we are at a time where we are in entering the Industrial Revolution 4.0, which is AI-driven. But this time, we will have to respond to the weaponization of trade and the ability to control digital data flows, which is extremely important today. That is, data is going to be the gold. And we must give up on old trading tools and mindset. That is extremely important. And we need to be competitive enough to attract global investors with cutting-edge technologies so that we could catapult the whole spectrum from bullock cart to spacecrafts as far as development and future growth is concerned. In my view, the first three things that we need to be doing is that we must focus on the basic amenities, or the three H's as I call it. Number one is health, hunger, and habitat. Roti, kapda, and makan are always very much needed, but we need to be extremely cautious whatever we do next. So therefore, in my view, these three H's are extremely important. One of the biggest advantage we have today is while the rest of the world is aging, India has a, a solid young population. It is the greatest resource that we have today, and you are part of it. And this demographic dividend needs to be converted into an economic edge. So it is extremely important that we take the right kind of things. If you go by the statistics, then while China will be aging at a very high rate very soon, India will take over China in a few years' time. The US, Russia, Japan, all these are aging countries, old countries. So their total focus is going to be either getting people from India or elsewhere, or their focus is going to be somehow to look after these people, where so that GDP will be far more confined to getting these people looked after, their own people, and somehow continue to grow that. We have roughly about, according to estimates, we have about 30 years more. We are already in 2020. By 2050, 2055, the other Africa will probably take over us as far as the youth is concerned. And so it is extremely important that we finalize and calibrate our policies at this point of time, that we do something that is going to be good. We need to focus on key technologies such as artificial intelligence, robotics, big data analytics, and invest in human capital. And the world-class AI-driven healthcare, high-quality education, coupled with increased labor, and taking the industry nearer the rural areas, because that's what is going to be extremely helpful for people. We must not neglect 50% of workforce, that is women, who are far better than men in many ways. So they need to be incorporated, opportunities have to be created for them, and the urbanization should be balanced, and so should be the industrialization. We already have various programs called Make in India and all those, which will be there. We need to develop incubation centers for research and technology. That is extremely important. Very often I find that we do not have the linkage between industry and the university or the institutions like yours or others, where the students do some research and that can be converted into an economic opportunity for the larger good of the country and the world. But that is something that's been missing. I have seen this thing in Sweden, and I think we can have some kind of a linkage, because they have created that exceptional ecosystem between the industry and the research institutes that has made that country far, far ahead of many Western countries. It is not only these European countries, it is also Asian countries, how they have come up. Look at the case of Japan. I mean, Japan was completely demolished during the Second World War. But it came up. Of course, the Marshall Plan and other things were there. The assistance of the Americans was there. But they miniaturized the technologies. And that is one country which doesn't have any natural resource. On the other hand, China. Look at China. 1980s, India and China had the same GDP, had the similar kind of identical indices. But what has happened to China today? It's 5 times your economy. It is hoping to replace the United States as #1 economy. Then you look at South Korea. This was one country, newly industrialized economies. Until 2008, they were able to double their GDP every 5 years. And they used that flying geese pattern of technology transfer from Japan to Korea. And today, any country you will go, you will find that large number of these people are using the Korean goods. And Koreans have almost have captured 50% of most of the electronics and electrical markets. Now, the big countries, we can talk the history of Russia, we can history of Germany, and all. They have become very big because of various reasons. But look at small countries like Estonia. Estonia is a Baltic country in Europe, and it has digitalized more than any other country could do before. 100% digitalization in the country. Even in Africa, I was in Africa last year in Rwanda, and I was surprised that that country, it's absolutely speak and span. Secondly, it was suffering from the bane of genocide. It had a bad memory. But today, it adopts the most modern governance structures. More than 85% of public services are ensured through digital mode. And I was also surprised when I saw that the healthcare system is good there. And they were even supplying medicines through drone technology across the country. Now, these are innovative practices that the governance does, or the governments of the country do. Now, we can say, of course, it's very easy to be critical and cynic that in India, we have developed this sector, we don't have that sector, this has been the problem. So you can always pinpoint some blame somewhere. But we are not into the blame game. We are definitely behind some technologies. We depend on large scale because we have not invested enough in R&D. I do not want to go back to 2, 4, 5,000 years ago when we invented the zero and we were the knowledge power of the world also. But at the same time, we are the same Indians, isn't it? So can we not revert back to the same kind of an advantage for our own selves and for the country and for the world now at this time? It is extremely important. So we need to see very holistically, do a SWOT analysis, exactly what are we good at. So we should have a short-term, medium-term, long-term plan as to how the comparative advantage of India can be used for our competitive advantage. That is extremely important. Now, technology and innovation, as I said, are going to play a very, very major role. Now, you saw that about the Zoom and the 5G, we have seen what is happening in against China all the time, and the Zooming of the conferences has become most popular. But people say that, okay, if you take 5G from China, okay, they are going to listen into your thing, they can create a disruption in your systems, and therefore we should not go and get from China. Frankly, China, of course, is an enemy state at the moment, but do you frankly think that the US or any other country which provides you technology does not listen to? So we have to create those structures where we do not allow anybody else to exploit our weakness. And we can do that. So I think that we need to get out of this dependency syndrome for good, whether it is for getting normal technologies or the green technologies which we require for our overall development. Another important thing that is, in my view, is that we need to develop a techitude. We must be technologically savvy. We must look for something, wonder about something, ask questions, whether it is beneficial to us, can I improve upon it, can we do something about it? This is extremely important for us to do that. And therefore, in those stages, we have to become critical parts by acquiring all this in the global value and supply chain. The whole purpose is not merely being self-reliant, but by instilling a competitive edge in the areas we eventually are going to excel in. We will need to work consciously through the right kind of digitally empowering policy framework in a mission mode. Time is very little. 30 years is nothing. We need to be within a decade. We need to be there. And we have already got, the Indian government has started on several schemes like Digital India, Make in India, Skill India, Stand Up India, Startup India, and the list goes on, including the Atal Innovation Mission. So we want to create our own. In fact, I was surprised to see that the Geo Group has already created something called Geo Meet, and apparently it is becoming quite popular. Of course, there are going to be glitches because those who have worked before us in technology have tried to improve upon those technologies much faster than us. So it's extremely important. Now, what are we going to accomplish by doing all this? We need to have an industrial revolution for which we will need Industry 4.0. It's all AI enabled. We are already Alexas and all those, we are Siri and all, we are asking things. So artificial intelligence is already operating in our ecosystem. Then we need to have our agriculture. Agriculture should also be 4.0. The new technologies, you have to do less water consuming technologies. You have to create the whole value and supply chain, the logistics, the cold storage, all kinds of things. We are the second largest producer of fruits and vegetables. 30-40% of which goes waste. We are not able to use that. That's a wastage. That needs to be avoided. So we need another green revolution next time. Now, but we are also looking at possibilities of doing so in Africa, which have millions of acres of land, and Indian companies, along with some Gulf countries, could work on the food security there. Then we need to look at the innovation, as I call it, India plus innovation. We have stopped inventing. We just passed, get the degree, try to work lifetime in a small company. We need to think out of the box. We need to come out. I know there are problems. There are problems of infrastructure, problems of the ecosystem that need to be carried on. But for all this to be absorbed and to take us to the next level, I believe that society needs to get out of this mindset and must behave like as if it is a 5.0 society. You might say it's easier said than done, but it's not. The farthest village Indian who's sitting there, who's not literate enough, has a mobile phone. Everything is on your mobile phone. You can transfer information. You can do something good for them and something with society. You can link them up. You can get the information. And the most important thing in my view of all this to achieve is smart governance, which is 6.0. It should be above everything else. How it will be achieved, anybody's guess. But it is most essential since we are still working in the 2.0 mode. Very often, things are not put in their perspectives. Circumstances lead us to do that. But we have to work together. We have been a trading nation all along. And we have reached the heights of entrepreneurship in large numbers of countries and have excelled wherever we are. So why can't we do? We are there in NASA, we are everywhere else. So we need to do something here. We have shown it even during this COVID time. India was totally importing PPE in the mass, we were not producing at all. Now within 2 months, 3 months time, we are not only meeting our own domestic requirements, but we have also started exporting to various countries in the world. So no dearth of ideation and implementation. As far as the political leadership is concerned, I must compliment them because today, during this period, Prime Minister Modi came up with a very great idea of having the digital diplomacy. He invited the SAG leaders, discussed about how to fight in the region, and then he persuaded the Saudi Crown Prince to host the G20 virtual summits. And in the course of bilateral meetings, he spoke to hundreds of leaders around the world, along with his ministers and everybody else. So this is something that has given India an edge. Secondly, what we did was we tried to provide the medicine, the personnel, medical personnel to more than 123 countries. That is not known. This adds to India's soft power profile in the world. And we are in the UN this year. UN is a non-permanent seat, but we are hoping to become permanent eventually. But remember one thing, without internal power and strength, overseas projection can only be a bubble. If you want to embrace the concept of Atmanirbhar in its entirety and revolutionize the way we do things, for which our fundamental thinking has to be changed, first, you must see the change. Second, you must feel the change. Third, you must imbibe the change. And number four, you must drive and enrich the change itself. As M. Sheikh said about adapt to change, change to adapt. It will come. It will come when you imbibe it into your mindset is completely in sync with what is happening, in sync with what you are going to achieve. So it is extremely important to remain on board, think ahead, think like a visionary, and act in concert with your ideas, with what is required. I must say that most of you are actually young people. The world, the India of tomorrow depends on you. So I would urge you to need to have a flame, the passion, the madness to excel in whatever you do. Friends, mediocrity and sitting by the fence will no longer be the viable options in the coming decades because the world is also going to move faster. At this point of time, we may have certain leverage because of the COVID hiatus, but the new challenges will need new resolve and newer initiatives. I would like to close by quoting the famous Oprah Winfrey. You must have seen her programs. She said, "Do not sleepwalk through your life. Listen to yourself." And frankly, as P.G. Wodehouse said, be a man and bite the bullet for yourself and for the country. Thank you once again for inviting me to this interaction.